In Brazil, dozens of people are dead after a three-story building collapsed.
Authorities say among the dead are men, women, and children aged 5 to 45. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Marcos administration omits fees for the overseas employment certificate. Philippines joins the United States for Air Force drills a second time. U.S. President Joe Biden arrives in Britain ahead of the NATO summit. NATO leaders to draft agenda ahead of this year's summit. And India warns of apparent issues on green hydrogen trade. The National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, states that the El Niño's impact on inflation this year is expected to be insignificant. NEDA Undersecretary Rosemary Adilion states that El Niño is unlikely to have a huge negative impact on inflation or the economy. However, she highlights the necessity of immediate preparations this year to combat El Niño next year. Adilion assures the public that the government is implementing measures to mitigate the negative effects of long droughts and dry spells. She notes that the planting season has already concluded and will start reducing water allocation for irrigation from Angat Dam.
The Department of Environment and Natural Resources directs households in the National Capital Region and nearby provinces to conserve water ahead of adverse effects of El Niño. The Water Resources Management Office, or WRMO, issues Bulletin Number 2 to expand the water conservation directives from its previous bulletin. The agency also directs barangay officials, condominiums, and subdivision managers to advise residents about conserving water. Bulletin Number 2 dictates the extended campaign of water conservation as well as lessening activities that consume a lot of water. Pag-asa reports that Angat Dam's water level fell to 179.56 meters, lower than its minimum operating level of 180 meters.
The Commission on Audit, or COA, calls out the Department of Labor and Employment over deficiencies in its COVID-19 aid. COA flags DOLE for excessive multiple payments to 461 beneficiaries amounting to 3.06 million pesos, as well as grant assistance to almost 8,740 unqualified beneficiaries. COA also questioned the department over unclaimed financial assistance in the possession of money remittance centers. Meanwhile, state auditors say the deficiencies recorded cast doubts on the validity of the financial assistance granted to the beneficiaries of the said programs. COA suggests that the labor agency requires the concerned offices to further investigate the excessive payment, submit explanations of the deficiencies, and apply necessary actions. The programs are under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act instituted by the Philippine Congress in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. mandates the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, to consider eliminating fees for the Overseas Employment Certificate, or OEC. The President meets with DMW, Bureau of Immigration, and the Department of Information and Communications Technology, or DICT, at the Malacanang Palace. They discuss the introduction of the DMW mobile app, designed to simplify the journey for OFWs. It will include the OFW Pass, a secure digital version of the OEC. The OFW Pass will fully replace the OEC following a 2 to 3 month transition period upon activation. The OFW Pass will remain valid until the end of the OFW's work contract. while the OEC has a validity period of only 60 days. The DMW is currently awaiting approval from the DICT for the official launch of the app after ensuring its cybersecurity features.
Senator Amy Marcos criticizes the lack of government supervision towards United States aircraft compared to Chinese vessels. Eren Santos has the details.
Chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, Amy Marcos, raises concerns about the presence of additional United States C-17 Globemasters in Manila and Palawan. Previously, the U.S. Embassy admitted to the lack of coordination with local ground handlers, causing hours of delay at the airport. The C-17 Globemasters departed from Guam, landed in Manila and Palawan, then later arrived in Yokota Air Base in Japan. The senator stresses the need for equal scrutiny of both U.S. and Chinese activities in Philippine territory. She urges the military and foreign affairs officials to determine if covert U.S. military flights aggravated the situation in the West Philippine Sea and Taiwan Strait, and calls on them to weigh the risks presented to public safety. Eden Santos for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Philippines and the United States launched the second iteration of the Cope Thunder Air Force exercise at Clark Air Base in Pampanga. A total of 1,272 airmen are participating in this bilateral exercise. 687 from the Philippine Air Force, or PAF, and 585 from the U.S. Pacific Air Force. Commander of the PAF Air Defense Command, Major General Agustin Malinit, emphasizes the importance of this air drill, saying it will further strengthen cooperation between the two nations. Malinit states that the second exercise will primarily focus on large force deployment of aircraft. This will also improve their mission planning capabilities and execute defensive and offensive counter-air operations. The exercise is scheduled to continue until the 21st of July.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines, together with the Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG, are preparing to drive away dozens of Chinese vessels in the Iroquois Reef if they remain in the area this week. Madeline Villar Moratillo tells us more.
Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore J. Tariela, says together with the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the two parties will intensify patrols in the Iroquois Reef. This is after a Western Command report showing 48 Chinese fishing vessels anchored in the area. Tariela warns that the Chinese may be preparing to occupy the reef located 128 nautical miles from Palawan. The reef is affirmed by a 2016 arbitral ruling that the area is within the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. PCG is preparing to deploy its 44-meter and 97-meter vessels to drive the Chinese vessels away from the country's EEZ. Madeline Villar Moratillo reporting for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Italy visits the Philippines to hold a discussion to strengthen defense ties. Prince Limonero for the report.
Italian Ambassador to the Philippines Marco Clemente reaffirms strong bilateral ties between his country and the Philippines. This is after the arrival of the Italian Navy ship Francesco Morsini in Manila for a goodwill visit. According to Clemente, the nations are working to finish a memorandum on military cooperation. The Italian envoy notes that there will be negotiations to be held to improve the partnership in the military industry facet. He adds that his country's technology has more to offer. The ambassador also asserts Italy's position that a rules-based international order must prevail in disputed waters. Italy's ship's tour in Manila is part of its 5-month naval campaign in the Indo-Pacific region. Both the Philippines and Italy are signatories to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. Prince Limonero for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, NATO leaders set to meet in Lithuania for its Summit 2023. And South African President Ramaphosa confirms the in-person meeting for the upcoming BRICS Summit. Stay tuned, Matanang Agila International will return for more global news.
This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart.
Sa dami ng problema, parang ang hirap ng huminga, di ba? Minsan, pakiramdam mo, hopeless na. Kaya dapat ihayag ang saloobin, himayin ang hinaing, alamin ang pwedeng gawin. Mag-reality check tayo.
Abangan sa Counterpoint.
Makakasama natin ang original na hitmaker ng Pilipinas.
OPM icon Mr. Marco Sison.
I want you close to me and hold you endlessly.
Ngayong Miyerkules alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito lang sa Net 25.
Pinaparisign siya. Naku, maling-mali naman ho yun. Kasi nga daw, nagkamali. Teka muna, sino ba nagkamali?
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. North Korea accuses the United States of violating its airspace and declares that any further flights may be shut down. North Korea's Ministry of National Defense reports that U.S. reconnaissance planes and drones alongside a nuclear submarine were found near the peninsula. They emphasize that such provocative actions by the U.S. bring the region closer to a nuclear conflict. South Korea's military denies North Korea's claim and emphasizes the routine nature of U.S. air surveillance assets. North Korea condemns the U.S. for introducing strategic nuclear assets to the region. They call it nuclear blackmail and a grave threat to peace.
The U.S. diplomat enacted emergency exit plan has left hundreds of Sudanese refugees stranded in various airports as a result of Washington's hasty withdrawal from the conflict-torn country. The plan involved destroying all passports submitted to the U.S. Embassy, and now they face multiple challenges in having those documents replaced. RT correspondent Gebrehi Wat Eonetu noted that the issue resulted in several consequences.
Problem now, because Sudan is facing a war, it will not be possible for the Sudanese nationals, maybe, it will not be easily possible for them to replace the passports. It may not be easily possible for them to get laissez-passer. For those non-Sudanese nationals, again, there have been on the border with Sudan, there have been embassies who have been establishing access points to be able to provide them documentation to leave Sudan in case their documentation has been destroyed, in case they have been unable to leave through other means. So it will make it much more difficult for them to access safe haven, to leave the country, to access their rights. But for the Sudanese who lose their passports and for the Sudanese who lose their documentation in this procedure, it makes it extremely difficult for them to try and get documentation from Sudan. Because the Sudanese officials will have the same worries that I just described. Sudanese officials will be saying, well, in a war zone, I can't just issue new passports. I'm having a civil war. And in the midst of the civil war, it's quite a difficult time to give documentation to particular citizens because you have a highly heightened security environment. So it puts the actual individuals with the passport holders in a very bad situation.
China and Solomon Islands signed a new police cooperation deal, strengthening their bilateral partnership.
再次在北京会晤，两国决定建立新时代相互尊重、共同发展的全面战略伙伴关系。在短短的4年时间里面，中国和所罗门群岛。
The agreement is one of 9 documents signed during talks between Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare and Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing. Premier Li emphasizes the fruitful development of their bilateral relations over the past 4 years. He states that the diplomatic switch was the correct choice in line with the times. Sogavare is also set to inaugurate the Solomon Islands Embassy in Beijing. Solomon Islands severed ties with Taiwan and established relations with Beijing in 2019.
U.S. President Joe Biden arrives at 10 Downing Street, where he is welcomed by UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Sources say Biden will also meet King Charles III at Windsor Castle. From the United Kingdom, Love and Season reports.
U.S. President Joe Biden met British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in Downing Street on Monday, as both readied for a NATO summit where Ukraine is expected to push to join the alliance once its war with Russia is over. Ahead of the visit, the White House said President Biden would seek to further strengthen the close relationship with Britain. He will also meet King Charles III, who will host him at Windsor Castle, a royal residence west of London, where they are due to discuss climate issues, a subject close to the King's heart. It will be their first meeting since the monarch's coronation in early May. The president did not attend, sending First Lady Jill Biden instead, but the Bidens were at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in September. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak traveled to the United States last month for a 2-day visit, where the leaders discussed Ukraine, AI regulation, and post-Brexit ties. They also agreed to a new economic partnership, the Atlantic Declaration. President Biden said the United States has no closer ally than Britain. But Prime Minister Sunak came away empty-handed on the UK's ambitions for a post-Brexit free trade agreement with Washington. The two countries are key allies of Ukraine, and Russia's invasion of its pro-Western neighbor is likely to top the agenda on Monday, after U.S. President Biden pledged to supply Kyiv with controversial cluster munitions. More than 120 countries have signed an agreement banning the production, storage, sale, and use of cluster munitions, and Sunak on Saturday highlighted that Britain was among them. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak stressed, however, that Britain, which has supplied Kyiv with heavy battle tanks and long-range weapons, will continue to support Ukraine. The talks will be an opportunity for Biden and Sunak to compare notes on Ukraine ahead of a meeting with fellow NATO leaders in Lithuania. Amanda Slowat, National Security Council's Senior Director for Europe, said in a briefing on Friday. From London, United Kingdom, this is Love and Season for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky hopes for the best possible result in the upcoming summit. Zelensky and Polish President Andrzej Duda discussed the summit in a meeting and agreed to work together for Ukraine. Kyiv waits for the clear signal to join the alliance. Duda is one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine and guarantees its security from other NATO members. However, U.S. President Joe Biden says that bringing Ukraine to NATO with the war can lead to a declaration of war with Russia. President Zelensky has used U.S. cluster munitions that caused significant damage to Russian forces. Biden admits that supplying cluster bombs to other countries was a difficult decision. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan assures that the cluster bombs will only be used in Ukrainian territory.
NATO leaders are set to meet in Lithuania from July 11 to July 12 for a summit in response to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and Kyiv's membership to NATO. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to come to Vilnius with the other 31 NATO leaders to lobby for Kyiv's inclusion into the alliance. NATO suggests that the Kyiv accomplish the membership action plan to join the alliance. Kyiv's political ties offer a multi-program agenda to help Kyiv catch up to Western military standards that will boost connections by launching a NATO-Ukraine Council in Vilnius. U.S., Britain, Germany, and France assure Kyiv of possible long-term commitments on weapon supplies. This weapon supply worth of tens of billions of dollars was pledged in support of Kyiv. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey has been pressed by other members to drop his objections and let Sweden join the alliance. Sweden contends that they met all the conditions from Turkey, but the religious text-burning protest in Stockholm hangs heavy on President Erdogan's decision. NATO countries pledged to move the spending to 2% of gross domestic products after Russia took Crimea from Ukraine in 2014. As the leaders sign off on new regional plans in Vilnius with the allies' plan against any Russian attack.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says her talks with top Chinese officials helped put ties between the two countries on more sure footing. This as she wrapped up a trip aimed at stabilizing shaky relations between the two biggest economies. Arlene Ocampo has more.
During Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's 4-day trip to Beijing, she stresses the need for healthy economic competition and improved communication between the U.S. and China. Yellen's trip comes on the heels of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit. Yellen urges cooperation on the existential threat posed by climate change. Yellen says the U.S. believes that the world is big enough for both countries to thrive. While it did not produce specific breakthroughs, Yellen's trip furthers a push by President Joe Biden's administration to steady ties with China.
My objective during this trip has been to establish and deepen relationships with the new economic leadership team in place in Beijing. Our discussions are part of a broader, concerted effort to stabilize the relationship, reduce the risk of misunderstanding, and discuss areas of cooperation.
Arlene Ocampo from Atanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The U.S. has sent high-profile officials to New Delhi as a gesture toward their budding partnership. U.S. Undersecretary of State for Democracy and Human Rights has arrived in New Delhi to meet with senior government officials and civil society organizations. The State Department said Zaya will meet with senior government officials to discuss the deepening and enduring U.S.-India partnership, including advancing shared solutions to global challenges, democracy, regional stability, and cooperation on humanitarian relief. Zaya is set to meet with her Indian counterparts to discuss humanitarian concerns, including the Rohingya refugee crisis, labor issues, human rights, free and fair elections, and combating human trafficking. The high-profile delegation's arrival in India comes close after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first state visit to the U.S. Zaya's visit to India also comes just a few days after U.S. Ambassador to India Eric Garcetti was criticized for commenting on India's internal affairs after he suggested Washington was ready to assist India in tackling the raging violence in northeastern India.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa confirms that the upcoming BRICS summit will proceed as an in-person meeting.
We are going to have a physical BRICS summit, and all of us are committed to having a summit where we will be able to eyeball each other. We have not held a physical summit for quite a long time, almost 3 years now. And so, sorry to disappoint you, it's not going to be virtual.
BRICS is a group of the world's fastest-growing economies that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Incumbent BRICS head Ramaphosa states that the summit format is being finalized. He emphasizes the importance of a physical gathering where leaders can interact face-to-face. He did not mention whether Russian President Putin would attend. President Putin currently has a warrant in the International Criminal Court, or ICC. South Africa, as an ICC member, is expected to arrest him.
Uzbekistan President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has won a third term that will keep him in charge of the tightly controlled, gas-rich Central Asian state until 2030. The 65-year-old has promised to open up Uzbekistan to foreign investment and tourism and implement major reforms in Central Asia's most populous country. Mirziyoyev, who was running against three largely unknown candidates, won Sunday's election with 87% of the vote. A former Soviet republic, Uzbekistan is strategically located between Russia and China and shares a border with Afghanistan. Mirziyoyev previously served as prime minister under predecessor Islam Karimov before winning his first term in 2016 and getting re-elected in 2021. Mirziyoyev, who trained as an engineer, portrays himself as a reformer, creating a new Uzbekistan and wants to double the gross domestic product to $160 billion.
Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has announced his resignation and departure from politics. His announcement comes after the collapse of his coalition government in a row over immigration issues. Rutte has held talks with King Willem-Alexander regarding their arrangements for an interim caretaker government. The Netherlands' longest-serving government leader said that he would not lead his People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, or VVD, into the upcoming general elections, as he would be taking a departure from politics. Rutte announced that his four-party government had broken down over the issue of asylum and unbridgeable differences. The coalition collapsed over Rutte's plan to tighten curbs on reuniting families of asylum seekers in an attempt to dampen the numbers of arrivals after the overcrowding scandal. The current MPs will remain in place until elections in a caretaker capacity, unable to take decisions on controversial issues such as house building, pollution, a cost of living crisis, and asylum. A general election is set to take place in mid-November.
The opposition in Zimbabwe has lost a bid to overturn a police ban of a rally it planned Sunday ahead of next month's elections. Supporters of the country's main opposition gang sang and danced outside a court as a judge upheld the ban. Angel Membrera tells us more.
This is the sixth time in a week the Citizens Coalition for Change in Zimbabwe has had a gathering banned or unlawfully disrupted. At an urgent sitting of the court on Sunday, a judge upheld the ban, ruling the coalition had failed to notify the police on time. An opposition lawyer responded saying the playing field is uneven, adding democracy is being eroded. The ruling ZANU-PF party has been in power since independence from Britain 43 years ago. The coalition accuses the ZANU-PF of political violence, intimidation, and arrests to disrupt its political meetings. 80-year-old President Emerson Mnangagwa is seeking re-election. He replaced strongman Robert Mugabe in 2017 after a military coup. Angel Membreri for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said her government would issue 425,000 work permits to non-EU nationals between this year and 2025. The announcement follows repeated complaints from employers in various industries as Italy's economy rebounds from the pandemic shock. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Italy has granted fewer than 31,000 work permits a year to migrant workers from outside the EU, where Rome plans to grant an additional 40,000 permits this year. Since coming to power, Meloni's government has tried to reduce the number of irregular migrants. It has also pushed the EU to take stronger joint action to safeguard Europe's external borders, including promoting deals with North African nations. In its statement, Rome said some of the permits for workers in agriculture and tourism would be reserved for workers from countries that signed deals to counter irregular migration. Among the skilled workers, Italy will welcome electricians, plumbers, construction workers, nurses, bus drivers, hotel employees, mechanics, and fishermen. Up next, New York City shootings, 3 leaves 1 dead and 4 injured. Firefighters rescue an 8-year-old boy out of a volcanic crater. And Japan warns of its heaviest rain ever. Mata ng Agila International will be back after this short break. Please don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by Robic Builders.
Nagbabalik ang Lutong Daza dito sa Net25. Ako si Sandy Daza.
At ako naman si Patty Daza, and we are the Cooking Cousins. Asahan nyo ang mas nakakatakam na mga recipes, mas malakas na halakhakan.
At tawag ko rito put-put eh.
Put-put. At syempre mga celebrity guests na game na game.
Express sa boy din. Galing.
Kita-kit sa kusina. Lutong Daza, Saturdays, 11 a.m. sa Net25.
Mahina yung arms ko!
Yeah, the way. Halika na! Mamaya ang pahinga.
Hindi pa naman kakulay yung ano, tita na. Yung pool.
Yay! Thank you, PJ!
Something new ba?
Something new. Hindi talaga. First time ko na magtanim.
Note po kayo ng episode na ito. Guest ko po si Miss Aramina.
Magandang araw, magandang araw.
Abangan sa Counterpoint. Makakasama natin ang original na hitmaker ng Pilipinas, OPM icon Mr. Marco Sison.
I want you close to me and hold you endlessly.
Ngayong Miyerkules alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito lang sa Net25. Pinaparisahin siya. Naku, maling-mali naman yun. Kasi nga daw, nagkamali. Teka muna, sino ba nagkamali?
In the U.S., the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, is recommending respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, vaccines from GSK and Pfizer. The recommendation is for people ages 60 years and older. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky is endorsing the agency's recommendations for use of new RSV vaccines and people ages 60 years and older using shared clinical decision-making. The new vaccines, which are the first ones licensed in the U.S. to protect against RSV, are from GSK and Pfizer. Shared clinical decision-making means eligible individuals may receive a single dose of the vaccine based on discussions with their healthcare provider about whether RSV vaccination is right for them. People at the highest risk for severe RSV illness include older adults, adults with chronic heart or lung disease, adults with weakened immune systems, and adults living in nursing homes or long-term care facilities. CDC estimates that every year, RSV causes approximately 60,000 to 160,000 hospitalizations and 60,000 to 10,000 deaths among older adults. These new vaccines are expected to be available this fall.
Thailand marks the 5th anniversary in front of the Tham Luang Cave in Chiang Rai province. The ceremony is set to commemorate the global mission for saving the 12 young stranded football players and their coach in a flooded cave. They showed respect for the deaths of former Thai Navy SEAL diver Saman Kunan, former Chiang Rai Governor Narong Sak Osatanakorn, and football player Duang Pech Promtep. Various football players, their families and relatives were present during the ceremony. The 200-meter deep chamber one that the visitors used to enter was the command center for the rescue operation led by Narong Sak and Thai Navy SEALs. This rescue mission made headlines as the 12 members of the Wild Boars football team and their coach were trapped in the Chiang Rai cave system, and it inspired some movies, documentaries, and books across the world.
Children in Iraq turned the site of the 3-year-long war against the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, into a playground. The city has traces of damage from the war between 2014 and 2017. Mayor Abdul Muttalib Al-Gatanfari of Al-Katunyaya in the old city of Mosul emphasizes the significant effects of war on people as it becomes part of daily conversation. A resident of Mosul, Bashar Qasem, expresses that the area is unsafe and asks for security authorities to provide new parks for children. Mosul has been under the control of ISIS from June 2014 to July 2017 until Iraqi forces regained control and settled peace in the city. The war resulted in the destruction of buildings, ancient churches, and monasteries.
A man goes on a bloody rampage, allegedly shooting 4 people and killing 1 in New York City. The victim, an elderly man, was fatally shot in the back by the gunman on a scooter. The alleged shooter, Thomas Abro, was apprehended with a 9mm pistol and an extended magazine. The shootings occurred at various locations in Brooklyn and Queens. Abro is also linked to another shooting incident where no one was injured. He is facing multiple charges, including murder and attempted murder. The New York Police Department states that the motive for the shootings is unknown and it appears to be a random act of violence.
In China, a man with a knife killed 6 people and wounded 1 at a kindergarten. A 25-year-old man was arrested following an attack in Lianjiang, Guangdong province. Employees who answered at the Lianjiang police headquarters declined to give more details. An unidentified witness said that the attacker's child had been struck earlier by the car of one of the victims, where one of the people killed was a teacher at the kindergarten. Attacks on kindergartens in China are reported regularly, usually blamed on grudges or mental illness despite increased security. China prohibits most gun ownership, where personal attacks usually are carried out with knives or homemade explosives.
At least 14 people are dead after a building in northeastern city, Brazil, partially collapsed. Rescuers wrapped up the search for survivors on the weekend. Julian Bukayan reports.
Part of the 3-story structure in the city of Paulista in Brazil came tumbling down Friday. It was condemned in 2010. But for the past 13 years, it served as a refuge for homeless people who illegally occupied it. The dead included men, women, and children, aged 5 to 45. This is the second such collapse in the region in 3 months. In April, at least 5 people died when a building collapsed in neighboring Olinda. Building collapses in Brazil are often concentrated in impoverished communities where illegal construction is rampant. Julian Bukayan from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
A miraculous rescue on the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador. Firefighters pulled an 8-year-old boy out of a volcanic crater he fell into. Thomas I. Likeness has that story.
Little information has been released about the lad's condition. News reports say he suffered head trauma, 100-meter deep crater. The circumstances leading up to the fall are unclear. In a statement, the park says the quick response of rescue.
India has expressed concern against developed countries setting restrictions on green hydrogen trade. Experts say that if New Delhi will implement similar measures, then other nations would be in trouble. Analysts believe EU's actions cut into the profits of top exporters like India. Green hydrogen has lower carbon emission. It is used to make electricity and gas, which is crucial to bolstering many industries. Economist and policy expert Akash Jindal believes there should be free trade in the green hydrogen business.
India is considered a friendly country by almost entire world. We are having free trade agreements with many countries. Now, as far as green hydrogen is concerned, it's very, very important for us Indians because our target is to have net zero carbon emission by 2070. So it's a project which is very close to our heads and hearts. We want to have a net zero carbon emission by 2070. Now, as far as the world is concerned, if the world puts some regulatory barrier, now I also, as an economist and a citizen, would request my government to put regulatory barriers. Because if some other countries does that, so I mean by world I mean if some other country they put regulatory barriers, then I would also request my government to do so. Why not? Because see, we are a friendly country. We are considered a friendly country by others. So I think the business and trade should be free. Why others also must understand, the other countries also must understand that they should let business products move freely. Then only can we have very good trade and business.
Argentina just inaugurated the first stage of a gas pipeline that will carry natural gas from the Vaca Muerta to Santa Fe by way of Buenos Aires. This counts as an essential project to cut through the country's significant energy deficit. Vaca Muerta is a massive shale formation seen as a key to boosting the South American country's gas supplies and lessening the need for imports. It contains the second most unconventional gas reserves and fourth most in oil. Argentina, whose central bank reserves have dwindled, just registered a $5 billion deficit in the energy trade balance in 2022 because it needs to import energy during the highest consumption months. The completion of the first stage of the gas pipeline would provide around 11 million cubic meters of gas per day. The inauguration comes as the ruling Peronist Party aims to clinch the upcoming October elections despite the country suffering from a 114% inflation rate. With Economy Minister Sergio Massa, who pushed for the economic benefits of the pipeline, seeking the presidency in what is predicted to be a tight race. With the new pipeline up and running, the country expects to reach net zero in its energy balance in 2024 and achieve a surplus in 2025.
One person was killed and thousands were urged to evacuate their homes in southwestern Japan as forecasters warned of the heaviest rain ever in the region. After a week of torrential downpours, rivers burst and sodden lands collapsed in deadly landslides that killed a 77-year-old woman with 9 other people missing in Fukuoka and Oita regions. Footage shows a gash in the hillside above a home in Karatsu City that had partially collapsed into a river, with many of its traditional roof tiles smashed or sliding off. In Fukuoka's Asakura City, officials said the rain was believed to have peaked, but there were still fears about flooding. The Prime Minister's office said a task force had been established to coordinate a response to the rains. Japan is currently in its annual rainy season, which often brings heavy downpours and sometimes results in flooding and landslides. Scientists say climate change is intensifying the risk of heavy rain in Japan because a warmer atmosphere holds more water.
A new report released by UNICEF and the World Health Organization says globally, women are most likely to be responsible for fetching water for households. The report reveals that girls are nearly twice as likely as boys to bear the responsibility and spend more time doing it each day. Arlene Ocampo has more.
Did you know that in 7 out of 10 households without supplies on premises, women and girls are responsible for fetching water? This, according to the first in-depth analysis of gender inequalities in drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene or wash-in households. A new report released by UNICEF and WHO notes that women and girls are more likely to feel unsafe using a toilet outside of the home. They also disproportionately feel the impact of lack of hygiene. According to the report, globally, 1.8 billion people live in households without water supplies on the premises. Women and girls aged 15 and older are primarily responsible for water collection in 7 out of 10 such households, compared with 3 in 10 households for their male peers. Girls under 15 are also more likely than boys under 15 to fetch water. In most cases, women and girls make longer journeys to collect it, losing time in education, work, and leisure, and putting themselves at risk of physical injury and dangers on the way. The report also shows that more than 500 million people still share sanitation facilities with other households, compromising women's and girls' privacy, dignity, and safety. WHO Environment, Climate Change, and Health Department Director Dr. Maria Neira warns that women and girls not only face wash-related infectious diseases like diarrhea,
and acute respiratory infections. They face additional health risks because they are vulnerable to harassment, violence, and injury when they have to go outside the home to haul water or just to use the toilet. Arlene Ocampo from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The El Nino climate phenomenon has returned, and it is expected to put wildlife of the Galapagos Islands at risk. The El Nino phenomenon occurs on average every 2 to 7 years. Its episodes typically last 9 months to a year. In the Galapagos Islands, wildlife is in trouble as sea temperatures rise, leaving marine animals without food. Add to this heavy rains that can cause floods in nesting areas of land tortoises. Galapagos National Park Director Dani Rueda says the impact of the phenomenon is reflected in the reproductive success of the marine species. He says if the reproductive success of these species hits their population condition, the El Nino phenomenon in the Galapagos National Park in the area of conservation will have a very serious effect. He fears that if the rains are abundant in frequency, the intensity of the tortoises' nesting areas could be flooded and will reduce the reproduction of the nests, possibly to zero. The park has been expecting to have cold water as early as this time, but Rueda says what they have now is still very warm water. Stefano Castillo, a naturalist guide in the park, says algae is the beginning of the food chain for all other sea animals, especially for iguanas. She says the simple warming of the sea temperature causes algae to disappear, thus depriving sea animals of food.
Coming right up, 400 technology companies gather at the 2023 World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai. Witness Andrei Rublev's winning shot at the Wimbledon. And South Korean girl group 50/50 makes history on the Billboard's Top 100. Catch more news in business, tech, sports, and entertainment when we return.
Magising yung mga magulang ko. Ay, dapat mo nga silang gisingin! May sunog yung kapitbahay niyo, baka kayo madamay diyan! Nakaw!
Maupo ka. I am girly. Ready ka na ba sa interview mo? Yes.
Energy.
Energy drink.
Giving you the milk.
Twitter threatens to sue its rival Threads, calling Meta's new app a copycat. Vin Pasqua has the details.
Twitter threatened to take legal action against Meta just hours after the company launched its new app Threads on Wednesday. Twitter lawyer Alex Spiro sent a letter to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg accusing the new platform of hiring former Twitter employees with what it claims as an intention to copy Twitter and also using Twitter's trade secrets. Meanwhile, Meta Communications Director Andy Stone denies the accusations in a Threads post on Thursday, saying that no one in the Threads engineering team is a former Twitter employee. Twitter CEO Elon Musk also made a public post saying that competition is fine, but cheating is not. As of Thursday, Threads, which is linked to Instagram, has nearly 98 million users since its release, as it takes advantage of Instagram's billions of users. Vin Pasqua, reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
China's decision to restrict exports of two metals widely used in semiconductors and electric vehicles has set the market into a frenzy, as some industry suppliers worry that curbs on rare earth exports could follow. Beijing's announcement of export controls beginning August 1 on exports of gallium and germanium products has ramped up a trade war between the United States, which could further affect the world market.
The U.S. introduced the CHIPS and Science Act, asked companies receiving U.S. government subsidies not to expand advanced chip production capacity in China for 10 years, and induces allies to restrict semiconductor exports to China. This is a typical economic cohesion, isn't it? The U.S. generalizes the concept of national security and abuses national power to arbitrarily suppress enterprises like Huawei and TikTok.
Analysts saw the move as a measure to protect national security as a response to escalating efforts by Washington to curb China's technological advances.
China always opposes the US overstretching the national security concept, abusing export control measures, using all sorts of pretexts to cajole and coerce other countries into joining its technological blockade against China.
In China, more than 400 technology companies gather at the 2023 World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai. The summit showcases the participants' innovative products ranging from human-shaped robots to medical machines. This year's theme, dubbed Smart Connected World Creates the Future, is anchored towards China's efforts to provide new opportunities for the world with Beijing's new developments. According to Director Wu Jincheng of the Shanghai Municipal Commission of Economy and One Information Technology, the conference projects generate purchasing contracts amounting to 11 billion yuan, or 1.5 billion US dollars. There were more than 30 new products debuted at the summit. Wu adds that Shanghai will maximize the conference's strong attraction to promote the healthy flourishing of the artificial intelligence industry.
South Korean girl group makes history as first female group on Billboard's Top 10 pop chart. Stephanie Mayo has the scoop.
South Korean girl group 50/50 makes history on Billboard's pop charts. Their viral hit single Cupid skyrocketed from number 13 to number 10 on the July 15 pop airplay list, making the four-member group the first female group from South Korea to reach the survey's top 10 and the second from the country after BTS. The song debuted at number 36 on May 20th and on the 9th week already rose to number 10. 50/50 was formed just last year in November and consists of members Aran, Kina, Saina, and Seo. Meanwhile, 50/50's newest release, Barbie Dreams, featuring Callie from the soundtrack to the movie Barbie, was released July 6th. Stephanie Mayo for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
In the 2023 Wimbledon, the tournament continues as quarterfinals are on the way. First up, the world number 1 Carlos Alcaraz holds off Nicolas Jarry in dramatic center court battle. Alcaraz defeated Jarry in 4 sets, 6-3, 6-7, 6-3, and 7-5, and moved into the 4th round. The resurgent Chilean led by a break in the 4th set, but Alcaraz denied the upset bid after nearly 4 hours to win. Alcaraz will now face the former finalist Italian Matteo Berrettini in the quarterfinals. Meanwhile,
Public's wondering how it.
Andrei Rublev hit one of the best shots of the year to help close out Kazakhstan's Alexander Bublik in a 4th round thriller at Wimbledon. Rublev stunned Bublik and the center court crowd by hitting a diving forehead squash shot into the open court for a winner. He defeated Bublik in 5 sets, 7-5, 6-3, 6-7, 6-7, and 6-4. Rublev will now wait his opponent between Novak Djokovic or Hubert Hurkacz in the quarterfinals.
When we think of South Korea's landscape, bustling cities and skyscrapers with a mix of traditional streets may come to mind. But did you know that far from such dazzling city views, most Koreans prefer finding peace in nature? Catherine Ortula tells us more about South Korea's national pastime, hiking.
About 70% of the Korean peninsula is covered by mountains. So, it's no wonder that hiking is the go-to outdoor activity for many. One of the famous mountains is Palgongsan Mountain in Daegu. It has 3 peaks in a row with the highest standing at 1,193 meters high. The climb may be quite challenging for beginner hikers, but seeing the view from the summit will surely take one's fatigue away. On a cloudy day, a foggy abyss awaits on the higher peaks, ready to spark feelings of awe. Also, you get to meet fellow hikers and share snacks and stories with one another. Think you're too young or old to hike? The Palgongsan cable car can take people to the nearest summit within minutes. This ensures the elderly and kids don't have to miss out on the magnificent views. After exploring the mountain, going to a Korean tea house is highly recommended. There, you can enjoy some tea and traditional snacks while watching nature through the window, perfectly wrapping up your forest bathing experience in Korea. Catherine Ortula, reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Beautiful, beautiful Korea.
Beautiful country.
To start the week, here's a quote from Golden Globe nominee and American actor Michael Ealy. Hey, I know it's a Monday, but it's also a new day, a new week, and in that lies a new opportunity for something special to happen.
In all honesty, I know a lot of us dread Mondays, but we just have to change our perspective. It is a new start.
For some reason, I look forward to Mondays.
Yes.
Because it's a time to set things right for the rest of the week, right?
And you get to see your coworkers again after a weekend.
Excited for what special thing this week holds for us.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.